Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Irfan Sabir, MLA for Calgary-Buller-Macomb and Justice Critic for the official opposition. I'm speaking on the territory of Treaty 7 First Nations, and I also want to recognize Métis people of Alberta who share a deep connection with this land. I'm here to talk about the UCP's plan to abolish the RCMP in Alberta and replace it with a more costly provincial police force. This is a plan that nobody wants. Earlier this year, dozens of Alberta communities co-signed a letter calling on Justice Minister Tyler Shandro to scrap this idea. Through the summer, Tyler Shandro toured around the province trying to sell his police proposal. He held virtual town halls and he set up a website to explain all the details. And guess what? Even more communities joined the call to drop this terrible idea. Who can blame them? According to the UCP's own report, replacing the RCMP with a provincial police force will cost this province as much as $386 million in new upfront costs, as well as $200 million in lost federal funding. And of course, it is property taxpayer who will end up paying for all these new costs. The UCP has lied to Albertans about this for years now. But recently, Travis Stace admitted that a provincial police force will cost Albertans a bit more. And during that virtual town hall, the UCP's experts said explicitly that there is no guarantee that costs will not increase. So, what do those costs mean for Alberta families? We can use the province's assessment data to work out what the cost would be for each community that is currently being served by the RCMP. And we can use census data to work out what the additional cost would be for an average family of 4. For a family in Airdrie, a provincial police force adds $3,000 to their property taxes over 6 years. In Cochrane and in Chesmere, it's almost $4,000 more. Those aren't even the worst one. In Canmore, it's a whopping $10,400. These are punishing costs for Albertans who are trying to survive the worst cost of living crisis in 40 years. The UCP has already raised everyone's income tax, property taxes, school fees, tuition fees, interest on student loans, utilities, and car insurance. Now they want Albertans to pay even more for a UCP police force they don't want. But what is even worse is that the Justice Minister is wasting his time on this when he should be focused on the serious problems we have with public safety here in Calgary. Violent crimes and gun crimes are rising. Every day people call me and come to my office and they tell me that they don't feel safe on their streets, on transit, and in their communities. That is unacceptable. A responsible Justice Minister would be focused on restoring public safety in Calgary, in Edmonton, and across this province. But Tyler Shandro is totally distracted by this UCP provincial police force. Unfortunately, this foolishness isn't going to be over on October 6th. Every one of the UCP's leadership candidate has promised to move forward with the provincial police force. That means whoever becomes premier in October, they will force hundreds of millions of dollars of new property taxes onto Alberta families. And they will continue to ignore the rising problem of gun violence and crimes in our communities. I promise you that an NDP government will drop this expensive and stupid idea. We will focus on what matters to Albertans, which means feeling safe in your home, in your communities, and while moving around in your cities. Before I take your questions, I also want to speak briefly about the bizarre situation with the chair of Alberta Human Rights Commission. I've called for Mr. Colin May to resign from this post based on the Islamophobic opinions he has published. On Monday, the National Council of Canadian Muslims also called for his resignations. And they were joined by many, many community organizations. And by the end of the day, Tyler Shandro asked Mr. May to step down. But as of today, it appears that Mr. May has refused to do so. And let's be clear, Mr. Shandro has the authority to fire Colin May as chair of the Alberta Human Rights Commission. I call on Mr. Shandro to do this before the end of day today. Thank you, and I will be happy to take your questions.
Okay, we'll start to questions in person, then move to the phone lines.
Mike Simonton, CBC News. With all the disagreements, so municipalities have written a letter. The polls most recently speak of Calgarians or Albertans not in the majority, not agreeing with the new police force. Is there a hidden agenda? Why do you think they're pushing so hard for this?
I think what we can see through is that Alberta municipalities, their organization representing municipalities, they have formally passed a resolution in their fall convention opposing this idea. Rural municipalities of Alberta, they have passed a resolution opposing this idea. And then there were 72 community organizations and municipalities who co-signed that letter that I referenced in my remarks, that they oppose this idea. So clearly, UCP is not listening to the Albertans. And we are left to think that what's there? Why is UCP so hell-bent on replacing and dismantling RCMP with a more costly provincial police force, which will clearly download more costs onto the Albertans?
And further to that, the RCMP have talked about it, the effect on their morale, that local constables are feeling the effects of feeling the pressure of being replaced. What do you have to say to those RCMP officers, and what do you have to say to Albertans who are concerned about this, about the morale problem at the RCMP?
I certainly think that the statements made by this government, the plan presented by this government, is one that nobody is in support of. Albertans are not asking for, and those members on the front line, they certainly will be distracted, demoralized, hearing that every day, despite them faced with many challenges, despite them tasked with addressing the rising crime in the communities they serve. So that's clearly a distraction for them. That's clearly something that is demoralizing them. And I think that shouldn't be the way. The government should be working with the law enforcement to address the rising crime, gun violence in our communities across this province.
Thanks for taking my question. Tim Brooke with CTV. The UCP would argue that this isn't completely costed out yet. Is there a world in which you can see this police force be created in a more cost-efficient way, at less cost than it is right now to host the Mounties?
I think, let me start from Calgary. There have been more than 100 incidents this year so far that involve guns, like gun-involved shootings, just in Calgary. There were incidents in Edmonton. There are rural crimes. The question that need to be asked is that why is this government not focused on addressing the crime? Why it's not priority for this government? And they are exploring an idea which was explored before and rejected, and now their own report shows it's way more costly and there is no certainty of costs. And also the municipalities and Albertans at large oppose it. Second thing I would say, that the UCP, the current premier, outgoing premier, soon to be outgoing premier, is still under investigation by the RCMP for the leadership fraud and irregularities from 2017 leadership race. They should not be able to dismantle the RCMP while they are under investigation by the same agents. Third thing, I would say that there will be an election in anywhere from 3 to 7 months. So if they are so keen on this, they could run on this. They could make this as an election issue and let Albertans decide what they want. We live in a democracy. UCP should not be imposing their own agendas onto Albertans like this.
Sorry, so just a quick follow-up on that. So, I mean, you've poured over this report, obviously. You say that the UCP is hell-bent on making this a reality. Is there something in that report that you think could be done a little bit more efficiently to cut costs here? Is there any way that this can be done in a way that's, I guess, not hurting the Alberta taxpayer?
I think as Justice Critic, I get to meet with stakeholders. I get to talk to communities I serve, and the issue of crime, public safety gets brought up in many conversations. And in response to that, here in this Genesis Center behind me, 3 months ago, I believe, or a couple of months ago, we held a town hall where all level of government representatives were present. Calgary Police Commission was present, and what they were telling us that we need to focus on three things. One, they said that where in past we used to see a knife pulled out or machete pulled out in fights, now we are seeing guns getting pulled out. So they are saying that we need to do something about proliferation of guns in our communities. Second thing they mentioned was that over the period of last 2 years in particular, mental health issues have gone really worse. We need to focus on addressing addiction and mental health issues. Third thing, that due to the pandemic, many processes in court didn't go through as planned. So we need a more effective, functional justice system, fully resourced justice system that can make sure that those who commit crimes can be brought to the justice. Those are the things they outlined for us. And these are the things that should be priority for this government, not another costly police force, which their own report says that we will lose $200 million that federal government pays for the RCMP, and there will be $366 million in transition costs. In their own panel member, they say there are no guarantees for the cost. Costs could go up. So at a time when Albertans are facing a cost of living crisis, the government should not be piling on more costs onto Albertans. They should be working to address the priorities of Albertans, and their priorities are that government should address community safety, government should address cost of living crisis, government should address public health care and crisis in EMS. Those are the priorities I hear on daily basis from the communities around here and across this province.
Okay, I'll move to questions on the line. Just a reminder, if you're joining by Zoom, to use the raise hand function. First question goes to Tyson Fedor.
Mr. Sabir, if the NDP were government today, would you have taken a step on Monday to declare it a statutory holiday in wake of the Queen's passing?
I missed the first part of the question, but while I was coming here, I learned that this government has decided that it will not be a stat holiday and will be a day of mourning, and I hope that this gives all Albertans an opportunity to mourn Her Majesty the Queen in their own way and pay their tributes and be able to participate in events that will be held to mourn the death of the Queen.
Do you have a follow-up, Tyson?
Yeah, and just to follow up to that, so is that the right decision by the province, or if the NDP was government, would you have declared it a statutory holiday, closing schools and potentially small business?
I think I'm not going to speculate that if we were in government what we would have done. We are working with this government, and now they have called us back in session to pay tributes to Queen tomorrow afternoon. So we are working with them, and whatever the government decides, we will go with that, and we will join all Albertans, all Canadians who are mourning the loss of Her Majesty the Queen.
Okay, next question goes to Catherine Gurkowski.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. So you've costed out in great detail by municipality how much more property taxes would increase, but how do you know it would be from property taxes and not, say, a new funding agreement with the federal government, increased funding from the province? Why do you think it will come entirely through property taxes?
I think the methodology we use, that details will be included with my release, but I can tell you that at this point, what we know, that municipalities have only two ways of absorbing this cost. One, through property taxes, and second, through slashing of services. And this government, when they changed the police funding formula, they downloaded $280+ million onto municipalities in policing costs. And we know how that cost got absorbed. There was a mix of, I guess, property taxes and reduction in services. But in this model that we use, we are just taking the property, assessed property base, and the people and communities who are served by the RCMP, and those are the numbers that these communities have to absorb. This money has to come from somewhere, and more likely than not, this money will come from property taxes in the absence of any agreement in place with federal or any other government, which are not in place at this point. So it's, I guess, reasonable to say that municipalities will have no other choice but to absorb this cost through property taxes or slashing their existing services. End of the day, Alberta families living in these communities will have to pay for this UCP provincial police force.
Did you follow up, Catherine?
Yeah, so to follow up on gun crime, obviously, as you mentioned, we've seen an escalation in Calgary and Edmonton. What would you like to see as a solution to that? What are some measures that we could take to address this?
I think for starters, we would need this minister to drop this terrible and stupid idea of provincial police force and focus on the actual issue facing our community, and then work with the law enforcement, work with the communities to come up with a solution that can ensure that Albertans can feel safe in their communities and in their homes. But problem is that this government is not willing to listen to anyone. This government is not willing to work with anyone. So that's not the way I think we address this issue of gun crime facing our communities.
Okay, our next question goes to Tommy Osborne.
Hi, Tommy Osborne, Strathmore Now. So my question is, Tyler Shandro said earlier that pretty much all municipalities that have RCMP contract policing, except for Manitoba, is already looking at potentially getting out of RCMP contract policing. And because of that, he said it's important to discuss the issue and not just ignore it. So I was wondering what your response to this is, and if you believe that there's any merit to continuing this discussion.
I don't think there is any merit for any argument this minister have made in favor of provincial police force. He went on to tour rural Alberta, and 30% more communities are now opposed to Tyler Shandro's idea. What we know is that the current RCMP contract is in place till 2032. We still have some time. We still have 10 years. What we are facing today is we are facing rising crime, we are facing gun violence, and we are facing addiction, drugs, and mental health issues. If we address those, focus on those, that can help us address the issues that are facing us right now as province. But this minister instead is focused on a terrible idea that no Albertan no municipalities are in favor of. They're not asking for it. Albertans are asking this government to focus on crime and its root causes, and this government is completely ignoring them.
Did you follow up, Tommy?
Yeah, just one more quick question on the topic. So, to follow up with that, Shandro said that the federal government is actually trying to get out of subsidy policing and the contract, which is another reason that he's looking into it. Have you heard anything from the federal government that would suggest that this is a contract they want to get out of, that they don't want to be funding the RCMP in provinces?
No, I haven't heard that, and I know of no one who has heard that other than Tyler Shandro.
Tim, do you want more pass for questions either in person or on the lines? And see none, that's all for today.
Thank you very much.
So much for watching, and to learn more, check out albertasfuture.ca.